All right, Samuel, if you want to go back real quick. Hi, everybody. I'm Gabby Molnick-Majewski from DC Affordable Law Firm. For the benefit of those who are hearing the recording today, we're going to go back just to the very beginning and say a big thank you to everyone from JPMC who is joining us to volunteer for our big event, Securing Your Legacy, a community gathering on planning, probate, and property. This is the fifth time we've hosted this event, the first that we have done so in partnership with JPMC. We are so grateful for JP Morgan Chase's support of our work at DC Affordable Law Firm and for JPMC's work in helping to empower folks and bring attention to the issues of heirs property and the solutions that are available to help mitigate and resolve and prevent the future heirs property issues from arising. As we know, together it takes a village to ensure that intergenerational homes are protected and that families are able to plan with dignity for what they hope will happen with their property and their assets beyond their lifetime. So with that, we are going to do a quick overview of DC Affordable Law Firm. We are a leading nonprofit legal services organization here in the District of Columbia, centered on serving DC residents. We are in our 10th anniversary year. It's an exciting time for us here at DCALF. And we are really centered on providing critical legal representation and empowerment to annually over 500 modest and low-income DC residents, really reaching and serving the 1 in 5 DC residents who otherwise would be excluded from the legal marketplace due to income. We know that there are a plethora of services available for folks from the lowest income thresholds, and certainly there's the private marketplace, but there is a huge chasm in the middle that DCALF is really uniquely filling by expanding options for folks to not just receive legal representation, but to receive free legal representation in the most crucial areas of need for family safety, security, and economic well-being in family law, immigration, and the center of our work here today, heirs property, probate, and estate planning. We train up, we have an annual fellowship program where we have folks who are post law school who are cutting their teeth as brand new public interest attorneys. And our goal is to really help continue to bridge the systemic gaps that we know exist in DC's civil legal system. So we provide family law, immigration, heirs property, probate, and estate planning services. And our goal is to ensure that no one goes without a lawyer in their time of need, because the legal system was not built for everyday people to navigate these issues on their own. So with that, we're going to go right ahead. Okay, we're catching up for everyone here. And now that we are recording, so this event is, as I shared, it's the fifth time we have hosted this event. Every time we do it, it gets better, and I'm really excited. It is now a very well-oiled machine and a great opportunity for you all to interact with members of the public, and most importantly, for members of the public to come out and receive critical information, and not just information, but actually that next step in learning about their properties through the property checkups that you'll be assisting with, and completing intakes for the free legal services that they hope to walk away with, be it estate planning, probate, foreclosure defense, or all of the above, if that's their need. We really talk about this event as being an opportunity we want it to be, we call it a community gathering, because that's the vibe we're going for, right? We are not here to talk at people, but to ensure that this is a discourse and a conversation. We know that for people to come to an event like this, where they are considering things like a legacy and what may happen beyond their lifetime, that's a difficult conversation for many people to even come to. And many people don't like to think about those issues. And particularly so, we have found in Black and Brown communities where estate planning is a concept that often is associated with wealth. And many of the people that we are serving don't come from lots of wealth. And often the home is the most valuable asset that people have. And so we really think about this event as an empowering, dignified opportunity for folks to engage in dialogue and learn from our presenters while getting those intakes undertaken and doing their property checkups. We will be doing this event. It runs from 5. Oh, the public facing timing is a little wrong on there. We'll fix that for future use. But we are going to be, so folks will be, we open the doors at 4:30 for folks to come on in. We'll have you all join us by 4:45 is really the ideal time. We want to make sure folks there's parking on site and street parking close by in the neighborhood. The library, we have hosted this event at many times before. It's a really great setup for a volunteer opportunity. And we have folks, we'll have you come and bring your laptop and a charger, come dressed in whatever feels comfortable for you. Certainly at DCALF, our team and our staff will be wearing our DC Affordable Law Firm t-shirts or some version thereof. And we want this to feel comfortable and approachable for the folks who are coming and interacting with us. And the event really will run until, I'm going to admit Fatima into the space. And we're really excited to have folks come in. We will start the event at 5 o'clock sharp. We have some folks who will be offering remarks at the beginning. Heather Higgins-Bottom from JPMC is going to join me and some of our DC local leaders in inviting folks into the space. And if folks, we're going to go ahead and try and mute folks who are there. Okie dokie. Great. Yes. And so once folks come in, we'll have our volunteers, we'll have someone there to escort you upstairs so you can get situated, get laptops plugged in. We do ask that you come with a laptop charged, ideally. Though there are plenty of outlets nearby, we want to make sure we're ready and raring to go, and that not everyone needs an outlet exactly at the same time. But so after the initial remarks are done, we will go ahead and start the presentation. Our plan is to have folks kind of rotating through. They'll step away from the remarks in the presentation that will be held on the first floor, coming up to interact with all of you on the second floor for their property checkups and their intakes. And with that, we're gonna move the slide along forward. All right. And so I touched on this already, and I don't need to belabor the point, but certainly we know that at DC Affordable Law Firm, we are one of 2 organizations here in the District of Columbia running DC's first ever heirs property assistance program. And the goal of that work is to really help those families where title is not conveyed because a loved one passes and dies and does not necessarily, whether because of knowledge or because of the ability to move it forward, does not go through the probate process, which unless someone has an estate plan in place that mitigates and waives the need to go through probate, they need to go through the formal probate process to transfer their home. What we know, and certainly what research from JPMC highlights, is that often people don't know what they need to do to move forward the probate process. And that often what happens is that homes are locked up in the name of a deceased individual. And so this can lead to many, many issues. And what we find at DCALF is that though we have been running this heirs property program since the fall of 2023, still to date, most of the people who come to us, over half of the people who are coming to us, do so after they have gotten a foreclosure notice or a tax sale notice. And this event is a huge opportunity for us to be proactive, because we know that we don't want people coming through the doors once they've reached a place of crisis. Though we are always happy to hop in and help. We want to certainly be in a place of helping people understand their properties and what they could be potentially doing to safeguard them, and where there are heirs property issues, resolve those issues before they come to a crisis point. So that's the event. We're really excited to empower people, and I will say the community outswell of support. People love this event, and last time we hosted, we had to kick people out at 8 o'clock. I think we could have stayed for another 2 hours because of the enthusiasm and questions from folks in the space. All right, we're going to move ahead on this slide, and I will say, so in addition to the educational portions and the property checkups and intakes, I will note that this event could not be done without the village approach. So certainly all of you as volunteers are going to be essential to the success of this event. We host this event in partnership with DSB, with DC's Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. They play a huge role in spreading word to the community writ large and getting folks information about this event to sign up. And certainly, DCALF can't do it alone. We host this event in partnership with our co-partner in running the heirs property program for DC, Legal Counsel for the Elderly, and also team with the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, Christian Legal Aid, and Legal Aid DC to make this event a success. Because one piece of what we do is when we do these intakes on the back end, we divide up the individuals who are looking to move forward with their legal services. We divide them up to ensure that the organization that is best suited for their particular needs is the organization that they are paired with. So that way, folks can come in with a clear expectation that the organization that they're teamed with is going to hopefully be able to move forward in representing them. Okay, we'll move right ahead on the next slide. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Samuel Wilkins, managing attorney for our probate, heirs property, and estate planning practice at DCALF. He is our guru. Please feel free to pipe up with questions that you may have, and I'll keep an eye on the chat as well and share some additional information there. All right, Samuel, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. So yeah, before we begin, I wanted to underscore what Gabby kind of summarized about how this event is going to unfold. So there's really three main buckets of what people will get out of this event, what the participants will get out. There's the educational presentation. So attorney from DC Affordable Law Firm and attorney from Legal Counsel for the Elderly will collaborate in delivering information to the participants that they will take to better understand the landscape that they find themselves in. And then there's the two other buckets that you all are going to be integral for. There's the intake, where we get information about the participants. So if they are interested in further representation, either tied to estate planning or probate, we will divide those participants up amongst the partner organizations that Gabby indicated. And then the last thing is this informal property check, or this property health check, where you will actually help the participants understand a little bit more about their real property on a very individualized level. So you will, what we're going to go through most of today is you're going to actually have the skills to sit down with a participant and help them understand, do they own the property the way they thought they own the property, which is actually, many times is like, it's comfortable. Okay, cool. I thought I owned the property with my spouse. I do. Good to know. But actually, at least 3 or 4 participants in any given session, we will be telling them information that'll be surprising to them. And they'll be like, oh, I thought I owned this with rights to survivorship, but actually I own it as tenants in common. And we'll dig into this in a little bit more detail. But the cool thing about this event, I think, compared to many other events, is it's not just, giving information to people that's general. We're actually able to specifically tailor our analysis to their unique needs and then put them in contact with an attorney so they can further explore and dig into the information that you delivered to them. So that's kind of where you all fit in the intake and the informal property check space. And with this training, go for it, Gabby. Yeah.
And I'll just note, we open this event we have it open to 150 registrants. We anticipate that there will be about 80 to 100 people who show up for this event. We do cap entrant at 100. We know there's a lot of attrition sometimes, people's lives get in the way, and certainly lives are fluid. But last time we hosted this event at the Lamond Riggs Library, we had 85 attendees, and nearly every single person went through and completed an intake. So across these 5 events that we have done, it has resulted in 250 people going forward and being partnered with an attorney to move forward in their estate planning needs, their probate needs, or foreclosure defense needs, or all of the above. So it's very impactful in not just, as Samuel was saying, bringing information, but actually bringing tangible, actionable information that gets people in the pipeline to protect their properties and move things forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabby. Yeah, so the way that this training is going to unfold is we're going to dig into the documents themselves, and I'm going to show you how to get the information necessary to fill out the documents. And we'll start with the intake, and then we'll go to informal property checks. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I am just going to give a high-level summary. Gabby touched a little bit on what estate planning is, what probate is, and what heirs property is. And I know you all bring some of this information too, but just to make sure we're all on the same page and understand kind of the landscape we're operating in. So when we're talking about estate planning, we're talking about the process of planning for one's incapacity, right? What decisions should be made should one become incapacitated, and who should make those decisions? And by incapacitated, it's really due to an injury or illness, a person's unable to articulate decisions for their behalf. So they get to dedicate someone who gets to step in their shoes and make those decisions for them. And then it's also about planning for death, right? How one's belongings will be passed upon their death and who controls that process, right? Naming a trusted individual to be able to navigate that complicated process of transferring title of the name of the person who passed to the name of the people who are entitled to it, whether by will, if there's a will, or if there's no will by DC law. We like to call it health and wealth planning. That's something that really helps clients really understand what we're talking about. We're planning for who will take care of my stuff and who will take care of my person when I can't take care of these things on my own and when I ultimately pass away. So when we're talking about planning and when participants come in who have estate planning needs, that's individuals who are currently living, thinking about what they want to happen after they die or upon their incapacity. So in the intake that we'll dig into in a little bit more detail, we'll actually ask you to check off the relevant needs of the participant. So you're going to be engaging in some of that initial screening on your end, because that'll help us make sure that we're best passing the participants to the organization that is most tailored to meet their needs. So if we're talking about estate planning, we're talking about a person who has stuff and who wants to plan for what they want to happen to their stuff, and they want to plan who should make decisions for them should they become incapacitated. The flip side of that is then probate, right? And probate is the process of giving a deceased person's belongings to others according to DC law, or a will if they have a will, and resolving all debts, right? So probate is the flip side, where an individual has already passed away and you're meeting with their loved one who has to go through the process of properly transferring their stuff from the name of their loved deceased person into their name, right? So when it comes to probate, the box that you'll check for probate is the person says, my mom just passed away, or my mom passed away 15 years ago, right? Or my brother passed away, right? So that is when you're dealing with someone who has recently passed away and they want to take charge of transferring the stuff according to DC law, or a will. That is the probate process. So just a timeline to kind of help visualize some of these ideas. Before one becomes incapacitated, and again, incapacity due to an injury or illness, you're unable to articulate your desires. That's when you create the planning documents, the power of attorneys, the wills, the transfer on death deeds, the trusts. And then once an individual becomes incapacitated, that's when the healthcare power of attorney and the financial power of attorney really kick in to give the agent, the person you name, the trusted individual to step in your shoes, the ability to act on behalf of the incapacitated individual. A quick wrinkle here, in case any of y'all are curious, you can also, for financial power of attorneys, make them happen immediately. So there are certainly times people can say, you know what, I want this person to make decisions for me should I become incapacitated, but I also wanted them to make decisions now, right? That's fine too, right? So it's not necessarily when they become incapacitated, but most times that's at least a critical reason why people want financial power of attorneys, and healthcare power of attorneys have to happen when an individual is unable to advocate for themselves. If you're able to advocate for yourself, right? I want this surgery, I don't want this surgery, I want this medicine, I don't want this medicine. If you can do that, the healthcare power of attorney won't kick in. And then after one passes away, that's when the probate process kicks in, where the individual, the personal representative, the trustee, they are tasked with transferring people's stuff according to will, if there's no will, according to DC law, and then if there's a trust, according to the trust document. A key thing that I want to flag, both because it's important just generally, and also because it's something that you may see and we see a lot of the time, a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney cannot be executed after a person loses capacity. It is very common actually for someone to call and say, hey, Samuel, my mom had late stage Alzheimer's, right? I used to be able to, make decisions for her, take her to the bank, get cash to pay for her groceries, pay for her bills. Now she can't articulate her desires at all. Can you draft up a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney for my mom so I can do those things for her? And the screening questions I ask is, does she have capacity, right? Can she be the one sharing those desires with me? Can she be the client so I can draft these documents for her and she can say, yes, this is what I want? If the answer is yes, we're great. If the answer is no, that's the problem, Samuel. It's too late in the process. Then she is already in box 2. She's already lost capacity. So it is too late for healthcare power of attorney. It's too late for a financial power of attorney. There's another process called guardianship and conservatorship. It's under this intervention proceeding case. So there is a way to get daughter to be able to take care of mom, but it's a lot more cumbersome, a lot more time intensive and money intensive. So that's why this planning prior to incapacity is so critical. But I wouldn't be surprised. There are definitely people who come to our event who are coming on behalf of their parent, and they want you to draft a or they want to be connected with an attorney to draft a healthcare power of attorney or financial power of attorney for their incapacitated adult. You don't give legal advice. You don't have to provide legal analysis there, but that might be a helpful thing in the intake to kind of check off and indicate for the attorney that there might be some nuance here. We might need to do some screening for an individual's, whether this individual can actually do the healthcare power of attorney and financial power of attorney. And just very briefly, kind of, again, before we get into the substance of what you're actually going to be doing, Gabby mentioned this idea of heirs property, and heirs property is one of the critical issues that led us to creating this event. And again, the issue of heirs property is when property is passed through informal inheritance, but legal title is never transferred, right? So the paradigmatic example is mom's living in a house with her kid, right? And they're living in the house. Mom gets a little bit older. Kid's still living in the house. Mom dies. And then kid thinks he owns the property, right? He maybe there was a will, and maybe the will was filed, but probate wasn't opened, right? Maybe they think that they're paying the mortgage, they're paying property taxes, that's enough, right? But legal title is never transferred to kid, and then that kid has a kid, right? So then what you have is a grandchild is living in grandma's house thinking it's their property, right? And then all of a sudden they get a property tax notice. All of a sudden they get a foreclosure notice, and they talk to Office of Tax and Revenue. They talk to, the lender and say, hi, this is my property. I'd love to engage in some loss mitigation, right? I'd love to take the steps necessary to protect this property. And then the lender, Office of Tax and Revenue, says, this isn't yours. This is not your house. And they say, wait, I've been paying for the mortgage, right? I thought this was my house. And then they come to us and we have to untangle that process. Sometimes it's called tangle title. We have to untangle the process to make sure title goes from grandma's name into the name of the person living in the property who is really benefiting from the property. And, without that process, this limbo situation leaves homes vulnerable. And just a kind of a brief summary of some of the issues, right? It may lead to heirs either overpaying or underpaying property taxes. One of the biggest issues we see is there's these property tax deductions. I don't know if any of you all own property in DC or have seen this through your other work, but if you own a property, you get a reduced property tax, right? If you're a senior citizen, you get an even lower property tax. But that doesn't follow the house, that follows the individual. So once an individual dies, then the property is no longer entitled to that, and it is not entitled to it during probate. So many times heirs will be living in the house thinking everything's fine, and then they get audited by OTR saying, you should have been paying this, Office of Tax and Revenue, you should have been paying this. You were actually paying this. You have to pay the delta of what you didn't pay plus penalties, interest, which can automatically put the property into tax sale. And then after maybe it does get audited or after they properly notify Office of Tax and Revenue, as long as it's not titled in someone's name, they can't apply for homestead or senior. So they're just leaving property tax deductions on the table. Heirs property might also not be covered by homeowners insurance, right? A lot of people think that homeowners insurance tracks the house, but it traces the individual. And if there's a fire or a flood or something like that, the property, the insurer might be well in their right to say, actually, no, we're not going to cover this. Sometimes they do, but it becomes a lot more complicated and requires some attorney advocacy. There's certain grants that individuals might miss out on, right? There's certain kind of, government, federal or state funding that individuals may not be able to avail themselves to because their title is not in their name, right? They'll apply. A lot of people will come to me and say, Samuel, I heard of this really cool option. I could get this money to make my house more accessible. So cool. I called to apply and they say, you don't own this property. What gives? And then we have to work to untangle title, right? You can't get loans, right? One of the coolest things about property is being able to take out equity for renovation, for what have you. You can't apply for a home equity line of credit or any other loan backed by the house because you don't own the house when you're in this limbo heirs property space. And then, as I indicated, that the house is at greater risk of foreclosure or tax sale because when things go wrong, you can't just call up the Office of Tax and Revenue or the lender and say, hey, I'd love to kind of figure this out in a little bit more detail. They say, you don't own this house, we will not talk to you. And then it becomes really messy. So that's kind of what we're trying to resolve through this whole process, right? Helping people on the front end plan so that heirs property doesn't happen, right? And then helping people who stumble upon heirs property resolve that as early in the process as possible. And as Gabby was introducing this, she says the biggest problem is people don't know what they don't know. And I think that's 100% it, right? There's so many of these things are just so complicated, right? And intuition doesn't win the day. So to be able to help educate people, both in a general sense and a tailored sense, so they can then get in contact with an attorney to help put them up for success is really what this event is all about. So with that, I'm going to dig into actually what you'll be doing, the intakes, the property check worksheets, and going in line by line so you all feel comfortable day of with what you have to do. Before we do that, anything high level when we're talking about substance, some of it is just so, we could kind of all be on the same page and it's interesting, hopefully, for you all. But part of it is also just we will in the intake be asking you to do a little bit of general issue spotting. So if you have any questions, definitely want to take a break right now to ask them. And then while you do that, I'm going to be stopping my share and pulling up the intake form that we'll be talking about.
We can't get legal advice, right? I think that's like a
Exactly right. You will not be giving any legal advice. So anything that they say in the intake, and we'll talk about that, you'll be making any notes kind of for us. We take the intake forms ourselves. But if they ask for any legal advice, is do I own this property? Do I not own this property? You will not. You will say great questions. What we will do is we will kick this to you will have a substantive conversation with a lawyer. Everyone who attends the event is, well, with some income nuances that Gabby will dig into, will be anyone who's eligible will have a consultation arising out of this to the extent you want it. So if there's any legal advice questions that are at play, you can say, that's a great question to talk to the attorney that you're set up with when the time comes.
Yeah. And just to spell that out a bit further, certainly you are not going to be on your own in this event, though we think this training will be comprehensive and equip you with what you need to know and be able to do. Samuel will be in the space, as will a few other of our colleagues who are all part of our probate and planning team to answer any immediate questions you have as a volunteer. As much as we try and paint a broad landscape of what you may encounter, there are always little nuances. And so it's always best to say, you know what, I'm going to pull over one of the DCALF colleagues to come take a look at this, or you can ask the question. It feels very comfortable and inviting for the person. And certainly you can make a note of any questions around ownership on both the intake form and for the person, writing down on their takeaway sheet, because one of the big things is that we actually won't take home information about the person's property after this event. They keep the information about their specific property, and we are just moving forward with the intake form. So that way they can rest assured knowing that their information is in their own safekeeping and that no one is doing anything with regard to their property without their knowledge or awareness. But that was a very good question. If you have other questions like that, feel free to lift them up now or at any point.
Does anyone else have any questions before we dig into the substance of the documents that you're actually going to be working with alongside the participant? Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. So what we'll do is, can everyone see this this intake form on my screen? Okay, fabulous. So we'll go through the intake form.
If you can make it a little larger, that might be
yeah,
helpful.
sure. Totally.
At least for folks with eyes like me.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you.
Perfect.
How is this? Is this it?
That's great. And so I'll note for everyone, so what you are going to have at this event, we are going to give each of you your own individual volunteer packet. We're going to equip everyone here with that ability to do both the property intakes, the property checkups and the intakes. We find it works best if the same person is doing the property check and the intake for the individual you are sitting across the table from. If it so happens that we have a fewer number of folks in the space, not everyone needs to be doing property checkups at the same time. We may ask for some of you to volunteer to be, we call them runners, to go and escort folks from the main plenary space on the first floor up to be able to do their property checkups. So if there's anyone in the space right now who says, that's what I want to do. I don't want to be on my laptop. I'm on my laptop all day. I'd like to just be interacting with members of the public. Feel free to plop that into the chat. I'll make a note of that. Otherwise, it is possible we may ask for some volunteers to help in that way, because we want to ensure that everyone has a great experience. Most certainly the attendees and the community members, but all of you, that you have the right volume of people who are coming through to do those property checkups. Okay. So within the volunteer packet, each member of the public, they're going to have their own packet. It's going to have a whole bunch of information, including a policy fact sheet that JPMC has created about heirs property issues, and what JP Morgan Chase is doing to help offer policy solutions and suggestions on that. So individuals, they have their own packet that they will have with them. You, as a volunteer, are going to have your own packet as well that is going to have a distinct slate of materials there. One of the things you will have in your paperwork is this intake form here. And we're going to walk through it. It may seem pretty intuitive. The questions are not that difficult, but Samuel and I are going to walk you through some of the specifics. And what I would say on the front end is that certainly we want to make sure this is a dignified experience for our community members. A big important thing that's noted here up in red, do not make assumptions. And we really want to ensure that it feels like a safe and collaborative space for people to share things about themselves, and for us to ensure we're getting as accurate of information as possible. Okay, so with that, Samuel, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, definitely. And please feel free, as Gabby indicated, to reach out with any kind of questions you all have. I'm going to flag some questions that have happened in prior sessions. We've done this volunteer training quite a few times now. And every time people ask questions like, oh, shoot, yeah, that's a great point. That's a great question. So feel free as things pop up, if you can think of something that might happen, if, please, we want this to feel as, predictable as possible. And again, we will also have I will be there, and an attorney from Legal Counsel for the Elderly will also be with you all. So if there's any questions, like just pull us in, and we're here to kind of help. So just going through this, line by line, obviously full name, as Gabby indicated, don't make assumptions. If, I tend to just ask people how to spell the name no matter what. You want to make sure you're spelling it correctly for our records, for conflict checks. And also just seeing someone write your name incorrectly in front of you is not that dignity affirming kind of experience that Gabby indicated. So always ask them to spell it is a great kind of rule. Pronouns is the next thing. Address, that's, that kind of is self-explanatory. Phone number, I would double check. I would always read the phone number back to them. There have been a couple times where people might have misheard something, and we've tried to call the participant, and it doesn't go to them or something like that. And whatever happened, whatever, but we want to make sure that we're able to reach them. Thankfully, in all situations, we were able to connect with them either through the address or the email. But just make sure. I would always just say, hey, and I heard it was XXX. Is that right? Yes, exactly right. And that's always good. Best time to call, after work is sometimes people say that's fine. All of our orgs understand how to be kind of intentional about outreach to participants, so that's a totally fine thing to write. Sometimes people say, well, what if the individual would prefer not a call? An email would be better, right? Or something. That's a great place to put, like, a best time to call. If you just want to write prefer email to schedule a call, that's great, right? Or prefer to correspond by email, or prefer to text, right? If there's any preferences that they have to make this experience more kind of tailored to their comfort level, that's a perfect place to put that information next to best time to call.
And not all community members have email addresses as well.
Right.
So certainly, if that's what someone indicates, just keep it moving and say, great, we're going to make a note that phone is your preferred means of communication.
Exactly right. And then again, right, with email, right, exactly as Gabby said, if they don't have an email address, that's no problem at all. Don't push. That's not that we don't need to stop the process for that. In NA or no email address is totally fine. The birth date and age are both really helpful. Birth date is really helpful for conflict checks. So if they say, well, here's my age, why do you need my birth date? I think you can just say, we want to make sure that, the organization we assign you to is able to serve you, and you won't get caught up in, a conflict or something. And then age is particularly helpful because different organizations have different age restrictions. So Legal Counsel for the Elderly can only serve people 60 years and above. So that's a helpful way. You may ask, well, if you have the birthday, you probably have the age. Yes, but less math might be helpful for all parties involved. So if they're willing to share both, that would be great. A marital status, it is very helpful for several purposes. One of them is when we're engaging in estate planning, a critical analysis is whether the person is married, because when you are married, there are certain rights that your spouse has, and kind of it, in a certain way ties your hand for what you can do. Like, you can't disinherit a spouse absent a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement. So it's really helpful to get that information. you will also sometimes see married couples come to the event together. So if they are married and that's a totally fine, that's great, right? And if they want to have a consultation at the same organization, that's great. You would make a note under there. So you might write, married, partner also attended, their name is X, right? Want to be together, right? And that way we can make sure that we assign them to the same organization. They may also want different organizations, right? If they're trying to do something creative with like prenuptial agreements or something like that, maybe they want different attorneys to make sure that they're equally represented and whatever they do isn't going to be subject to litigation if things go wrong. And two different attorneys is best for that. So if they have a spouse, you can indicate whether you want it to be same attorney, separate attorney, but making that notation is critically helpful.
And to
And
just clarify, because Liliana lifted up a question here. So we do want to do an intake form for each of the
yes,
spouses, but just make sure to note affiliated, married to or spouse of so and so, and list the name. And certainly if there's a preference as to whether they're with a different separate organizations or the same, often it is that folks are with the same organization, at least at this phase, and certainly we can suss out any interest that they may have in having separate representation to guard against any conflicts, in a more detailed consultation thereafter. But just make a note of the name, and that's particularly important as well, because we often have people who either have the same last name and they may not have any relation to one another at all. And certainly there are spouses who come and have separate names, different last names. The same is also true if we often have iterations of multi-generation families who come, which is always very exciting for us. So mom may come and her daughter may come to this event. We will do separate intakes for both of them, but any relation to someone who else is there, and you can just ask, oh, is there anyone else from your immediate family who is joining you today? And we can make a note of that and then tease out any questions. Or you can bring over Samuel or another one of our staff members to help tease out any questions that may exist there. Good
yeah,
questions. Keep them coming.
yeah, these are awesome. Yeah, another great question that kind of arose in a previous session at this point is it okay for two spouses to do an intake together, like both be seated at the table? You have separate intakes. Is that okay? Parent, child, that's totally fine, right? The information we're getting is not of the sensitive type, is not of the type that would require kind of conflict waivers before the intake. It's really just preliminary information. So if the individuals want to be separate, that is totally fine. They're welcome to. But if they want to be seated at the same table at the same time, filling out the intake, that is also fine too. We did an internal kind of, is this a conflict? Is this a problem without sufficient waivers? And made a determination that that's a totally fine thing to do on the front end. But when we do have the consultations with them, and this is something we will share, you don't have to worry about it, but we will reach out to them separately, and our first call will be a separate call. And then depending on the circumstances, we might need them to do a quick waiver for the purposes of serving both individuals in the consultation and then later extended representation phase.
And I think it's really important for folks. This may be intuitive, but if two people come up to the table together, don't make assumptions about what their relation to one another may be. We want this to be open and inviting, so you can say, "Oh, it's so nice to see both of you. Tell me about your relation to one another. What brought you both here today?" And you can ask. I always recommend asking affirmatively, would you like to sit down and complete your intakes here together? Or would you like to go ahead and I can have you go with one of my co-volunteers over here if you'd like to be separate. It's entirely up to you. And get a sense of both people really wanting that sit down to happen together. We've never encountered a situation where someone is feeling like they're coerced to sit with another member of their family, but we want this to be comfortable for everyone involved. And so certainly asking questions is always the best approach.
Awesome. And then, yeah, just adding the name of the spouse and your domestic partner, whether it's present or former, that does help us just for conflicts and just making sure that we have the relevant information to make sure that the people we're serving were authorized to serve without any issues. At this point, then you will, when it comes to the chronological process, you will stop and turn to the property health check document because these two questions are directly tailored to the property health check document. For ease of flow of the training, I'm just going to talk briefly about them and then we will go back to that and then we'll move on just so we can kind of check off the box of intakes, but just to name how this will interact. We keep the intake documents, but the property health check documents they take with them and they will bring to the consultations they have with the attorney. So what that means is if there are big issues, right, with so and so thought that she owned the property, but it was actually in mom's name, right? Or so and so thought this actually happened that she was going to inherit the property because her mom died, but her mom actually owned the property as joint tenants with rights to survivorship with her daughter. So it actually skipped her completely. And client or the customer was kind of floored when she saw the deed and when she learned about that, right? When it comes to those things, those are really helpful things to put in the intake. So as the organizations prepare for the consultations, they will see that information, even if the person doesn't send them a PDF of the property check or they don't bring the property check to the meeting, you'll have the critical information there. So that is why I would then encourage you at this juncture to either leave this blank and finish the intake and then come back to it, or go to the property health check at that moment. Um, this is also for the do you own your house? They may, I encourage people if you want to say like, do you think you own your house? And they can say, yeah. That might be a really good time to say, okay, great. Now we'll be able to move to the property health check, right? If they think that they own their house, but they don't, right? Then you can say, okay, that's really, really appreciate you coming here today. We'll put this all in this note for the attorney. So when the attorney is able to speak with you, they'll be able to talk through all of this and analyze this all with you, right? So I would say you can ask them what they think and you can check that off immediately, or you can wait for the property health check. It doesn't really matter because the critical thing here is if what they think is the case is not the case, you're certainly going to be putting that in the narrative box. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Um, Now, just some basic information. Sometimes people would prefer not to give this information. And if they say, "Why do I have to do this? This feels intrusive." What I tell people and what I would encourage you to tell people is, we're really excited to be able to provide free representation or free consultations and then potentially free representation for individuals who are of a certain income, right? We have grant funding to that enables us to provide that consultation representation. But in order to ensure that we can use grant funds to provide that free consultation and ultimately, potentially representation, we have to make sure that you fit within the income thresholds. So that's why. And if they have questions or if they say, I don't want to give that information, period, I think you can say like, okay, well, what that then means we're welcome to we're happy to do the property health check for you. You're welcome to go to the event, and we can even give you a list of referrals of people you can reach out to. But we would need this information to be able to serve you under our grants, which enable us to provide free services. So does that, Gabby? Do you have anything to add there? Is that
No, I think that's really
okay?
helpful. And certainly we don't want you to be in an awkward situation. So if that's a question that a community
Yeah,
member has, you can say, we're certainly here just to make sure that we're matching folks with the correct organization. And then that's a great moment to say, I'd love to bring over Samuel, who works for DC Affordable Law Firm. They'd be able to better explain it for you. And that's a great point to kind of phone a friend, tag in someone else to help. The other piece, though, that I will note as we go through this is that we do have options for people if they are over income. It's going to be slightly different than in the past. So I'll talk about that in just a second.
Perfect. And then just one thing to really flag, because this I think has tripped some volunteers up in the past. Please give annual income. This requests annual income. If the client gives a number that you're not fully sure, they might say 10,000, right? There's a chance that could be annual. There's a chance that could be monthly. Like I know it might feel slightly uncomfortable, but hey, just want to confirm, is this, you said 10,000, is this for the whole year or is this for a given month? Because there are definitely times where we'll see a number, right? If it's 80,000, the person's probably not making 80,000 times 12. Maybe they are, but maybe they can give me a referral for where to work. But that's probably not the case, right? But if it is like 15,000, 20,000, there is a chance, right? So it's really helpful to get that information because we definitely every year have a couple asterisks to say probably conserve if they say that this is annual, probably conserve, probably not. So just if you can confirm that, that would be great. And then source of income is helpful. Just people receiving pensions if they're receiving Social Security. Sometimes that does just help us kind of understand, what's going on. So that is just a big thing to flag because that tends to pop up sometimes, and it leads to a little bit of kind of confusion and ambiguity.
And for a number of people in the household, that might be intuitive. Certainly, people may have questions. What does that mean? As someone who lives in my household full time, I have someone who's in and out. Get the information from them. We don't need you to, belabor kind of parsing out the details. Just write down any information, right? So it could be someone says, I have an adult dependent child who lives with me. Great, write that down. So that brings your number to X by my count. Is that correct? Right?
Yeah. Definitely. And if you have any questions, right, I think someone asked the question exactly as Gabby said. Someone's like, I have someone who lives in the house, but they don't contribute to the unit, and they don't, really do anything. They just kind of like live and kind of come and go. Do they count? I think what you're welcome to, if there's any those are good questions. What I'll do is I'll make a note of that. And when the intakes are distributed, the organizations can make that determination. And should any additional information be needed, they'll reach out to you, and that should be fine. So yeah, don't get too worried about that. If anything pops up, you can either bring us over and we're happy to talk or you can just make a note and we'll get to it when we distribute intakes.
And Samuel, if you could, I'm going to talk a little bit. If you could actually pull up and share for folks the income chart that we have, that would be really useful to be able to cross-reference. We have on here, so of the organizations involved, one of the things that we're really excited about is that all of the participating organizations that we team with for this event are committed to delivering free legal services to qualifying folks. Of all the organizations, DCALF has the highest income threshold for eligibility. That is capped at 80% of AMI for DC. However, due to some exciting developments within DCALF, we now have an opportunity where depending on what the income tract is, the census tract income for the property that someone is looking to at least do estate planning for, we may have the opportunity to serve them even if they make a little bit more money than what is our typical income eligibility. So we have in the volunteer packets, you will have a stapled packet of referrals to private attorneys who could potentially serve someone if they are over income. But what we are going to ask is that if you encounter anyone who's over income based on the chart that Samuel is going to show you and based on what they have shared about their annual income and their household size, please flag. We're going to have two different volunteers in the room with all of you. Say, actually, I'd love for you. You're a little bit over income for our typical eligibility, but we want to learn a little bit more about your property to see if we, in fact, could serve you through DC Affordable Law Firm. It's really an exciting development for us. We always have at least a handful of folks who are over income. they're still walking away from this event with great information about their property and information about estate planning and probate and heirs property issues generally. But what we want to be able to do is hopefully now we can serve them if the home that they are looking to do estate planning for is in a particular income census tract, we may in fact be able to serve them. So if you encounter anyone who is over income, over that upper echelon that's listed here, flag down Samuel, flag down one of our volunteers, and we'll have that person kind of step to the side, and or they can give a quick information about their address to our volunteer, who will then do some quick sleuthing behind the scenes through a different website. We're not going to train you up on that process, but we'll take a look and see if we could in fact move forward and do the intake with the individual to get them connected with free legal services through DCALF. Okay, so this is the income chart. You will have a copy of this in your volunteer packet, so you can just take a look at comparing the income that's identified with the household size. Anything that you note, though, that might be a reason why there shouldn't be a strict adherence to this, feel free to flag that on the intake form, or grab Samuel or myself or another one of our volunteers, and we'll make a note. We'll try and parse out some details there. Okay, Samuel, if you want to get back to the form then, unless folks have questions on that, feel free to let us know. Okay.
So, and this is the referral sheet that Gabby referenced to, and this will be in your folder. It just names some referrals in the area that was compiled by all the organizations. And again, I think just to note that we do say that we don't, we're not guaranteeing the quality or anything, but they are put together as trusted referrals in the area.
The other thing that I think is important to note with referrals is that for each of the organizations that's participating in this event, DCALF, we can do heirs property work, probate work. DCALF and Legal Counsel for the Elderly can do heirs property probate work on behalf of someone who maybe lives in Maryland, but the home that needs to be probated, as long as it is a DC home and that there are DC heirs involved, we can do that work. However, for estate planning, the person must live in DC. So it is possible, if someone says they live in Maryland, we want to tease out what they're really here for. We can still find out if there is a probate issue related to a property of a deceased loved one. We don't want to make any assumptions there, but for estate planning, that is one of those spaces where you would actually provide the referral form and say, we're so glad that you're here. A lot of the information you're getting today is very transferable. We want you to know these things, but we can only do the property checkups for DC properties, and we can only provide estate planning representation to DC residents. Our organizations don't practice in Maryland or Virginia, just writ large. Okay. Keep on going.
I know that's a lot of contingencies, so you don't have to memorize all that. If someone's a Maryland resident, I think that's a totally fine time just to call one of us over saying, I don't think you may be able to be, someone might be able to represent you or have a consultation with you, but there's a chance. Let me call over someone to make sure that you don't fit in one of the exceptions, and that should be fine. So you don't have to memorize all the full web of if this, then that kind of thing. Great. And just to kind of close out this intake form, as I previewed before, it's great for you to check off what they need support with. The one thing I sometimes see volunteers do, if you could kind of, avoid or try not to, is sometimes people will say, I want to engage in estate planning so I can avoid complicated probate, right? If someone wants to engage in estate planning to avoid issues with probate, that's just estate planning, right? There may be people who have estate planning and probate. My mom recently died. It's been a mess. I need help with that. And also I want to do a plan to make sure that doesn't happen, right? That's great. But if someone has no connection with someone who has passed away, where they need to transfer their stuff, then that's probably, you can just do estate planning. And for foreclosure or property tax, if the person's like, I want to make sure my house never goes into foreclosure, you don't need to check that off, right? Foreclosure property taxes is truly, I've fallen behind on my mortgage, I've received a property tax notice, I've fallen behind on property tax, right? It's if there's an issue, because that's really helpful as we're trying to triage which organization is best for us to kick this to. Um, and then the very final thing is, and this is critical, make sure for everyone you read this volunteer statement word for word, and then check it off, right? This is critical so people don't think that they've established an attorney-client relationship with us, and it's just really helpful for, I mean, we have to do it. So just make sure you can just read it. If you completed an intake requesting further assistance, one of the participating organizations will be in touch regarding next steps and further intake by, and this is the date. It's Wednesday, November 19th. So just give them that date so they're not calling all the organizations every single day in the lead up to the 19th. There is no guarantee that any organizations to which you are referred will take your case. And again, that's really critical just so people don't get unrealistic expectations or believe that they have secured an attorney through going to this event. And then just check off that box, and that should really be it for the intake. I think we'll have a quick break.
Yep.
Yeah, quick.
Give me 1 sec. I'll finish that up, and then we're going to take a quick break. We will have volunteers in the room. We'll let everyone know who on our staff is going to be collecting the intake forms. So that way, once you complete this intake form, give it to our person. We will hold on to that. If there is anything you learn, either that you want to share while the community member is there, or if the person walks away and you say, I just learned, I think there's some complexities here, I want to make a note for you, you can certainly share that with us. We will have Post-its where there's the margins on this paper are pretty slim and small. If you have handwriting where you can fit it all in there, great. But if not, if there's something emergent happening particularly, or just a really complex situation, please write that on a Post-it, in addition to flagging that for Samuel or one of our folks there. So that way we know that that might be someone we want to move through and kind of process sooner than November 19th. We have definitely had people show up for this event who have a pending court action or a pending happening that we want to make sure that if we can serve these people, we are getting them in much sooner. And the other piece to just note is that some of the things that Samuel walked through here about income restrictions, about what folks can expect from the event today, that is something that I am going to cover with folks when we talk at a high level before anyone comes in the room to do their property checkups or their intakes with you. But we know people sometimes come in a few minutes late. People don't always arrive and hear all of those pieces, and repetition is a good thing. So we want to make sure people get this information. We appreciate you moving through this with us. We know it may feel like we're belaboring some of the points, but every time we do this, we learn a little bit more about ways to make this work even better for the community members and for all of you as volunteers. So thank you for navigating it with us. And Samuel, I'll let you take it from there. I think we're going to have a quick break. We know we have 45 minutes left and we'll be able to get through all of it. But certainly if you have questions, great. I'm going to answer. Samuel, if you want to tell people about the break, and then we can answer Liliana's question from the chat.
Okay. Fabulous. Yeah, let's do a break until 11:20. We have enough time. This last part shouldn't take too much time. So we'll take a break until 11:20, but we'll stick around for kind of one-off questions if anyone has one-off questions, and then people can watch the recording too if they want to see any questions they missed. So enjoy a break until 11:20, and then we'll dig in right at 11:20 and get done right on time at 12.
And Liliana asked a very thoughtful question around whether a household is a mixed immigration status household. Does that matter? And does it ever come up when asking about the total number of people in the household? I don't know that we've had that specific situation come up, but for our services, it does not matter what a person's immigration status is, whether it is a mixed immigration status household. And quite frankly, actually, one of the benefits of this event, if someone mentions that they have an immigration need or have a family member with an immigration need, that's not something you need to address. But fortunately, DC Affordable Law Firm is an organization that practices in family law and immigration in addition to our probate and estate planning work. And so if someone has another need like that, you can say, I would love for you, I'm really glad that you shared that with us. We can still move forward with your intake paperwork here. But if you're interested in talking to a member of DCALF staff to learn more about the immigration work that we do, feel free to flag that for them and flag that for Samuel or one of our other colleagues in the space. And then we can have a side conversation with that individual about any additional needs they have. And that's true for immigration. That's also true if someone has a family law need. Sometimes someone may come saying, I want to do estate planning, but I want to divorce my spouse. And so that might be something where we can say, let's talk with you about your family law need. Are you interested in meeting with an attorney and possibly pursuing representation there? And that's something that we have the benefit of these very intersectional areas of practice to be able to step in and help people. I will also note for folks, though this is not the crux of what we're doing here today, and hopefully my friends at JPMC are okay with me mentioning this, but at DCALF, we are one of the leading organizations here in the city empowering immigrant families with family preparedness services. And so what we are doing for folks, not through this event next week, but we are helping families execute proactive custodial, so for children, and financial powers of attorney in the event of any adverse immigration action or something happening beyond their control. And so if that's an interest of yours, feel free to send an email over to Samuel and myself. We often train up folks to be able to assist with that work and kind of do that on a quasi-rolling basis. So if that's of interest, feel free to flag that or send a direct note to me in the chat here, and I'll make a note of that and we can reach out to you separately. Okay. And Samuel, I want to give you space. If you have a need to take a quick break before folks hop back on, we can do that.
I'm fine. Yeah, anyone's welcome to take a break, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime too.
And Liliana, was that helpful in answering your question if you're still there in the space? Okay. And if folks are stepping back, I put some information into the chat, just ways that you can keep connected with us, learn more about our work, or really dive in more broadly to be a part of DCALF. We are always looking to grow our tent and have more people in the fold, connecting with us, contributing in a multitude of ways, time, talent, treasure, all of the above. We're just so excited to have you here and hope that this will be the start of your relationship and connection with DCALF. It's we continue to expand because we know that there is more work that needs to be done to bridge more and more of the gaps that exist here in the District of Columbia for the hardworking individuals that we are privileged to serve. So we're glad to have you here, but hopefully this will not be a one and done, and that you'll continue to be part of our community as we continue to serve the community at large. Okay, so we're
Awesome.
approaching
So
11:20. Yeah, so if folks don't mind just doing a quick thumbs up or showing your face quickly, just so we know when folks are back. All right, Daniel, I love the thumb action. Thank you, Jafar.
awesome. So it looks like we
Oh,
have
exploding thumbs.
um,
That's great.
yeah, majority. Yeah. So we'll dig in just to make sure we can finish up on time. We do appreciate you all giving 2 full hours of your very, very busy schedule. It's incredible just the willingness you all have. As Gabby said, it takes a village, and for you all to kind of be committed to furthering this process is incredible. So
And
we'll
if
we'll
anyone,
dig in. If I,
let
yeah.
me just note real quick, if anyone has to hop off a few minutes early before we wrap with the training, we will be uploading this. We'll have it up on DCALF's YouTube page. We'll share that link as well with Yari, who's been wonderful in communicating with all of you. We'll send that out to you directly, but we'll also give it to Yari to send out to a broader group of constituents as you see fit. And I put some information here in the chat. I certainly don't want to distract from the important part 2 of this training, but we have some information about DCALF there. We hope that you'll take a look, get involved. We'll sign all of you up so you can get excited for our occasional e-newsletters. We promise not to overwhelm your inboxes, but hope that you'll stay connected and look forward to receiving and learning more about our work broadly. Okay, take it away, Samuel.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So for part 2, we're going to be going through the property check worksheet, or kind of the property health check worksheet. I'll be toggling between the PowerPoint that has some screen shots of the process, but I find that in just trainings, or in anything, it's easier to actually see it navigated in real time. So I'll be showing screenshots through the PowerPoint, which we will circulate so you all can refer if you want, but whether it be beforehand or the day of. But I'll also be primarily navigating the actual web pages so you can see everything in real time. The websites that I will be referring to, you can do a copy and paste. You can see them in real time on the PowerPoint. We will also, at the end, we're going to talk more about this document, but you can also, there's a bit.lys, which you can kind of access these links with an easier link or a screen, or yeah, you can,
QR
whatever
code.
the
Yes,
whatever the
you got it.
QR code.
QR
That's the
code,
word. I
and we'll
appreciate it.
have
A QR code. Yeah, there we go.
And we will have
Yeah.
copies
So
of this printed for each of our volunteers right there. It'll be in your folder, and we'll have some extra copies on the table. We know that many of you are not going to be actually doing property checkups. We don't want people doing them on their phones with the QR, but certainly if someone has a device that is a laptop that's able to do that, great. And otherwise, the bit.ly links are going to be really important, because we're going to talk a little bit about how we want to make sure we're refreshing and closing out of the browser pages between individuals coming through. So, and certainly
perfect.
not every single person, I guess this is the last thing I will say before Samuel hops into these websites. Not every person who comes through may be a homeowner. They may say, I'm not a homeowner, but I know I want to do estate planning. I have a bank account, I have a car, and I want to make decisions to protect my health and wealth, and engage in powers of attorney and other things like that. That is a-okay. we want to serve those people too. We are an inclusive, wide tent, and certainly there is something for everyone, even though this is billed as a homeownership related event. So if someone comes through, you don't need to do anything as it relates to these property checkups. You would just go ahead and complete the intake form for that individual. But otherwise, for the property checkup, Samuel will walk us through from here.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm just going to kind of start top to bottom and show you how to get the information you need.
If
The
you can make
example I'm
those a
going to,
little larger too, that might be good for folks.
yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, I will, give me a sec. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Um, oops. Okay, let me just,
And if,
is this a good size for people?
yes,
Good.
I think
Okay,
that's a little bit
perfect. Okay,
better.
cool. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. So what we will so yeah, we'll start with, and what you'll see is the PowerPoint has both. The example I'm giving is a the place I stayed after my while I was in law school. So there's no client information, but the PowerPoint will also have, for informational purposes, some information from clients that have something more like what you will see with redacted client information. So to start off, the address, it'll just be the address as is given to you. So uh, so yeah, so basically when you use the bit.ly, you'll get taken to this page, and I'll try to make everything a little bit bigger so you all can see. Um, you'll click Real Property Assessments, and that'll get you to the page you need. You can't bookmark this page. It gets real, or you can try, but it gets really glitchy. So typically, what the best way to get to it is the real property assessments, and then pulling up this page. You may be able to kind of get to this page a couple times, but then it'll glitch out. So you might just need to go to the original landing space that the bit.ly takes you to. So we're gonna play with the address of and I'll make this bigger too. 18 N Street Northwest. So basically, you'll ask the client, okay, what is the address, right? And you'll get that, and you'll just type in 18 N Street Northwest, right? And then you'll just type it in here. What I encourage people to do is mirror it after the example. Hopefully you can see the example, it's not too small, but mirror it after the example without identifying Washington, D.C., even doing the abbreviation for street. Sometimes it's very temperamental about what will work, what will not work. If you have issues accessing it, please just feel free to bring one of us down. But if you follow the address, it'll probably do the trick for the example about 95% of the time.
No periods, no commas.
Exactly right. Yeah, again, that's exactly right. So that example is really the best way to mirror it. But if you have issues, flag us down. It really is temperamental, though, unfortunately.
And the other thing I'll
So
just note
that'll
is the worksheet, you're going to be filling that out with pen and paper. That's not going to be a typed document. Samuel's just doing that right now, just for
for
your
yeah.
visual reference.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So the first information you'll get is from this landing page where you'll see the relevant information. You'll see the square and the lot. So it'll ask, your first question is the square and the lot. So the first number is the square, 0618. And then the lot is 0054. Okay. So, and you'll use that later. So it's both important now, but also important later. So then the next question is the legal name. People are like, wait, is that the legal name of the property? No, that's just the name of the individual. So you just have to identify the name of client or of participant. Okay. So then you'll get to, so that'll accomplish the first box, okay? The next box, it'll go to the type of dwelling, and you'll see that under the use code. This, because it was a renting facility, it's a little bit different. What you will typically see is, this is a client whose information we redacted. You will see the residential single family detached. Okay. So that's a pretty common, the residential single family is that's a typical one that you will see. It might also say townhome, condo, but the most common is probably this residential single family. Okay. So then the next question is the property assessment. Okay. So to get that information, you can initially see it on the landing page. So you can get it from that first page that we went to, but you can also get it from the assessment, right? So we started on the details page, right? You can now just go to the assessment page, and that'll get you to the assessment values. Sometimes a question comes up, do I do the land value, the building value, the assessment value, or the total taxable? The critical information you'll want to get is from the assessment value. Land is the land, right? Building is the structure, and in total taxable is reduced based upon the deductions that I'll show you in a second. So you'll want to make sure you use the assessment value here. So for here, it's 898,050. Next is going to ask about the property tax balance. Okay. The property tax balance is how much is owed in property taxes, right? So in this case, because it's all up to date, it's all up to date. But oops, wrong one. But in a hypothetical example, may see a negative, right? In this situation, there's a balance that is in the red of 1,299 and 50 cents, right? If sometimes you see numbers that are actually numbers that are not zero in the green, that actually means there's an overpayment. And sometimes that does happen, right? So you want to make sure you're clear. Is it in the red or is it in the green? If it's in the red, it means there's a balance, and that's important. If there's a balance of more than $2,500 when the tax sales happen in July, that property will likely be sold at tax sale, or the lien will be sold at tax sale. So we're far enough away from July. There's some time to remedy. We had an event in March, and that was getting a lot closer to July. But you want to keep note of that. And again, the best way to see that is really under, no matter where you are, on the links, you will see that balance due at the top right hand corner. So for instance, for here it would be 0. If we were doing the other individual, it would be 1299.50. So right, depending on which one we do. We would also ask that we ask them if they need assistance or would like assistance paying this balance, right? It could be a situation where they just say, "Oh, shoot, yeah, the bill was just issued. I just didn't get around to it," right? Fine. Then they may say no, right? But if it's a situation where they do need support, right? Oh, I'm it's $15,000. Maybe mom had a house. I just got an audit from Office of Tax and Revenue. I have no idea how I'm going to be able to pay this delinquent balance. This property, I'm worried that this property will go into tax sale. That is something that you want to note, because not only can the attorneys help them with the untangling title, we might even put them in contact with the home preservation attorney at Legal Counsel for the Elderly or legal aid, but we might be able to put them in contact with some housing counseling services too. So it really is kind of part of the it takes a village approach. So if there is issues with the property tax balance, that's going to be something that you want to identify here.
And certainly don't make any representations that we can pay off that balance. Unfortunately,
Sure.
that's not something we're able to do, nor are our partners able to do. But it is beyond the opportunity to connect people. It's really helpful for us in understanding more about the trends that we see for the people who are turning to us with these heirs property issues.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Um, yeah, and if people say, well, what would you do to pay this off? I think you would say, no, unfortunately, that's, what our job is to do is we're here to issue spot, right? And if you tell us you need support, that is something we'll put in your intake, and that'll be something that as the attorney that you'll be connected with through the consultation, they'll be able to help you think through what they might be able to do and what other resources that they might be able to turn you to. So then that gets you through that. The next question is these tax exemptions or tax deductions, right? We talked about if an individual is living in the property and they're on title, they might be entitled to homestead. And then if they're a senior citizen, they might be entitled to senior citizen, which greatly reduces the property tax that one needs to pay in a given year. So that's helpful to know if they're taking advantage of what they're entitled to, or if they might be at risk because they're taking advantage of something they're not entitled to, right? And how do you figure that out? Well, this is under tax relief, right? So this individual is not receiving the benefit of the homestead because they're renting it out, right? So it's a rental, so there's no homestead or senior citizen. But what you may see is a situation where in this page where it actually says none, it may actually say homestead, right? So that's where you may see whether there's any tax relief being offered. So in this situation, you would say for this individual where you see homestead, you would say, yes, we are. Are you receiving? You would say homestead, right? And you would put the checks in the boxes, obviously. It's easier to put them next to it for demonstrative purposes. So then after you get that information, then you ask if you're not receiving these things, have you applied online, right? So say they do own the property, they own the property, they're living in the property, and maybe they're a senior, right? And you say, okay, I don't see you're benefiting from these, have you applied? And they may say, yeah, I thought I had them. That's really helpful to note. Or no, right? I just didn't know that this was a benefit I was entitled to. Then that's a really helpful thing to note too. And then you can identify, if no, are you interested in applying for tax exemptions, and do you want, assistance with this? One thing just to note for them, right? If you see a situation of heirs property, right, where an individual is receiving a property is receiving homestead and senior, but the named title holder has died, and whether kind of before this or during this, that means they're not entitled to the homestead and senior. One, you're not giving legal advice to say you need to get this off your property ASAP, right? You're not meant to be giving that legal advice, so there's no need to say that. But also, if you are going to be taking off those deductions, there's some serious tax penalties that are going to happen. And what we want is individuals to be situated with home preservation attorneys before they take that step to basically notify Office of Tax and Revenue and get hit with penalties and interest and the delinquent balance, right? So if they say, wait, I didn't know I wasn't entitled to this, what does this mean? Then I think you can say, okay, we will fast track. We will put a note that this is something that you should talk to with the attorney that you get in contact with, and you'll want to be strategic in how you approach that. And an attorney through the consultation will be able to help talk through your options and your obligations in this situation. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So then that takes us through the homestead, right? So what we've been doing so far is we started at the landing page. We got the information from the use code, and then we moved just one tab over to the assessment amount. And then the assessment amount also told us the tax relief. So most of your information is really just on 2 pages so far. Next, we move to foreclosure and tax sale notices. We ask if they've received any foreclosure or tax sale notices regarding the property. This is just us asking them, right? To those of you who are familiar with the Recorder of Deeds, there is a way to get this information through the Recorder of Deeds and looking up Liz Pendens and just information tied to that, you will not have time to do that, right? So we are not training you on that. There's no expectation that you're doing a full title search. We don't call these title searches, right? We're not abstract companies, right? So you're not going to get into the weeds of all of this. So what this is, we really just say, do you know that you've received something? Have you gotten something in the mail? Yes, we'll make note. No. Okay, that's good to know. In anticipation of your consultation, the attorney who's doing your consultation may look that up in anticipation to make sure that there's nothing that you didn't get that might be visible through the recorder of deeds or through other public search engines. So just don't feel like you have to do a deep dive into, to those of you who know how to do it, the recorder of deeds to get that information. It'll take too much time. And there will be enough participants that you probably won't have that time to do. So then fill out the information. When did they get it? Again, they might not have, if they didn't bring it with them, which they probably didn't, just they can say, oh, I got it last summer, right? Or, oh yeah, I think I got it a couple days ago. That's fine. It doesn't need to be a perfectly, memorized. What type of notice? It was for foreclosure. It was for tax sale. It was, I don't know, a delinquent Washington gas bill, right? Whatever. You can make note of whatever. And the parties involved, it really can just be, X, Y, and Z lender, Office of Tax and Revenue, right? It can be whoever did it. And then these again are just questions. You can get this information through the recorder of deeds, but you do not have time. You will not have time to do it, or we don't expect you to have time to get this information. So this is really, you will just ask them, right? Do you believe you owe a mortgage? Yeah, I took out a mortgage. It was a 30-year mortgage 15 years ago. I think it's about half paid off, right? What have you, right? So you can identify that. Do you believe you've taken out a reverse mortgage? To those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, kind of a standard mortgage, you get money and to purchase typically property, and the mortgage is backed by the property, and then you continue to continue to pay off the mortgage and build equity in the property. A reverse mortgage is the flip of that. You basically have a nearly fully paid off house. And the reverse mortgage company will give you a lump sum and take out interest. And instead of paying monthly to get more and more equity, you don't pay anything. You just pay property taxes and insurance. And so the equity gets less and less and less and less the longer you live. And then once you die, the entire amount becomes due and payable. So that's a tool that many individuals, senior citizens in particular, avail themselves to, which has really important implications for for what they can do with their legacy, with their property. And then also we ask about a home equity line of credit. Again, if they don't know, unknown is totally fine, right? That we don't need to spend a lot of time making them think about it, but definitely people come to the event saying, I have this reverse mortgage and I want to talk about it. And that's a helpful thing to make note of. So that's really all you need to know when it comes to the property, the Office of Tax and Revenue. So you start with let me just go back to my PowerPoint. You'll start with the landing page to get the square and lot, and you can also get the assessment there. You'll get what type of property it is from the details tab. And then you'll move to the assessment tab to get the assessed value or the tax relief. One thing I did want to show in case it pops up, if you have a bit of time, but it's not kind of an expectation, especially because we're so far away from the property tax sale. But I did want to show this to you all. If you go to billing history, typically you will just see the property tax bill. So you can actually pull up property tax bills online, right? And kind of access them. If there's no issue with tax sale, it'll just look like this: property tax bill, property tax bill, property tax bill. If there is a tax sale delinquency notice, that will actually pop up in the billing history. Okay, so that is something to kind of keep an eye out for if you if you have a little bit of time depending on the flow. And a person says, I'm really nervous that there might be a property tax notice, but I lost it, or I'm not sure. You can, if you go to the third tab, tax information billing history, you will see it if there is. So that could be something you might want to try if you have time, but not an expectation kind of as part of the experience. Okay, perfect. And then we'll just wrap up with just a couple extra final minutes of the recorder of deeds. So that's everything that you will get out of the Office of Tax and Revenue page, which is the first page you will access. The second page you will access is the recorder of deeds. And again, you'll use the check-in, you'll use the bit.ly to access it. If you don't have a recorder of deeds account, you will just create a new account here. It's free. It's very low burden to create. You just have to fill out the numbers in red, or the prompts in red. You don't have to provide even your address. So all you really need to do is just your username, a password, and then an email address, and then they'll send a link, and then you'll just create an account there. It's very, yeah, pretty easy, pretty instantaneous. I encourage people to do it. I highly recommend that people do it ahead of time, but sometimes there's always someone who forgets. And if someone forgets, then that's not a problem at all. We create it the day of, and it's that quick. It's pretty glitchy, so I just need to exit out of some things. That if you ever get to a situation where you can't access it, you might just have to exit out and log back in. It is a pretty it gets kind of glitchy sometimes. Perfect. So it'll take you here, and then you'll search by public records. And then what you'll do is you'll take to search the property, you'll use the square and the lot that you previously got above. So you can just refer to the square and lot previously above. You are welcome to search by all document types, but I encourage you just to search by the deed. If we were doing a more robust analysis, you can search by many other things, but because we're so tailored with the time we have, I encourage you just to click on deed, and then 0618, and then 0054. And this will pull up the relevant property and all the deeds that have been recorded in the relevant property. And you can click on each of these documents to be able to access the deed, right? So what you will all do to kind of do the analysis for how the property is titled is you will click on the most current deed, kind of the current vesting deed. And in this situation, because it's an LLC, I'm going to show you what the current vesting deed says, and then I'm going to jump to an older deed so you can kind of see what you're actually going to look like, because this will be what most clients will see. You'll see this deed is made on whatever day between this one person partying the first part. That's the person giving the property, and then the 18 entry LLC, the party receiving it, right? So, and then you will see how it is titled. And I think the best way to do that is to go down to this one, which is the former deed, which I'm only doing for kind of instructional purposes. But you'll see this deed is by between these two people, parties in the first part, and this person, party in the second part. And you'll see that this individual, because it's only one person, got it themselves, right? So if you were if Mr. Grant, who I don't know, and is the person who received this property, then you would say, or is the participant in front of you, you will say, when is the most deed recently recorded? It was recorded 9/20/2024. Is it in your name? You'll ask them. Oh, cool. Mr. Grant is in front of me. Fabulous, right? If no, whose names is it in? You can identify that, right? And are you aware of any other deed to this property that has not been recorded, right? So if they say, wait, no, I got a deed from Mr. Grant that gave me the property. I just didn't know I had to record it, or I have no idea where it went, right? That is something that you might want to flag, or that they will flag for you, or you might want to solicit, right? So is this deed what you expected? Awesome. If not, is there another deed that you think might have existed? Kind of what happened, or what have you, right? And I'm just going to go back one more just so you can see different types of deeds that might have been executed. So in this situation, right, you have a deed between this James individual, party in the first part, and these two individuals, husband and wife, parties in the second part. And what you'll see here is that you'll say the party in the first part granted to the party in the second part by tenants in by the entirety, right? So we going back to how this property is owned for the intake. You will ask, do you own this home? Yes, no, sole owner, joint owner. Um, you right, if it's for the example that I gave with um Mr. Grant, you can see they just owned it as a sole, so you would do sole, right? For these two individuals, joint, you would say joint, right? Because they owned it jointly. We decided, and then the last question here is how do they own it, right? There's sole, there's joint, and then there's joint tenancy, tenants by the entirety, or tenants in common. You should be able to see this from the document, right? So here you can see tenants by the entirety, um or if it's tenants in common, it'll say tenants in common. um we don't need to get too into the weeds with property analysis right now, nor do you even have to do it during the session. But just as a brief kind of, if it doesn't say it on the face of the document, I think it's fine just to say, doesn't say, or doesn't say, and then the during the consultation we'll dig into it in a little bit more detail. But just for your information before kicking it back to Gabby, tenants in common is when both parties own a interest in the property. Typically it's 50-50, but it can be 70-30 or whatever. And then each person's own, they're both able to possess the entirety of the property, but when they sell their interest or when they die, their share gets inherited per their will or per intestacy laws. Whereas tenants with rights of survivorship, when one party dies, the other party gobbles up their whole share, kind of, takes in their whole share. So the big thing is if there's rights of survivorship versus tenants in common, that'll impact what happens when it dies. You don't have to get into the weeds of that, but it'll be something that we will really focus on during our consultations. And then if you're curious, this is tenants by the entirety language. That's really joint tenants with rights of survivorship for spouses. There's special protections that spouses get. So the big thing here is just look on the face of the document and it'll say, or it should say, if it's properly drafted, what it is. And if it's not, I think you can just say, don't say, doesn't say, and then during the consultation, we'll be able to really dig into that in a lot more detail. So I think that should be it. So again, we start with the Office of Tax and Revenue. You get 80% of the way there through that information, and then you just pull up the most current deed. Again, I did 3 just to show you the different types of deeds you may see. You'll just have to click on the most recent one, see how the person who gets it, how they get it, and then you'll fill out those 2. And that's pretty much all you have to do with respect to the property check worksheet. Does anyone have any questions? I know we're running low on time, but does anyone have any quick questions? And if you
Daniel,
have
I
any
see your
other questions,
hand
you're
up.
welcome to shoot me.
Daniel,
Yeah.
if you want to come off mute.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Sam. That was really helpful. 2 questions. One about
Yeah.
the property check document process, and then one logistical. For this, I noticed at the kind of the top, there's a bunch of information that you're going to be pulling down and entering onto the sheet of paper. Have clients appreciated you walking them through what you're doing while right? Because some of them you're going to be going back and forth and asking. It appears for some of you, are just going to be pulling information off the web. Have you found they appreciate you saying like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to pull this, and just kind of narrating that component for them?
That's a fabulous question. And yes, 100%. I think, and that's
Okay.
typically how people do it. They'll be seated with their computer and say, okay, here's what I'm starting here. Here's the information I'm getting. Here's what I'm filling out. You will get this document with you, but here's what
Okay.
I'm doing. So I think narrating it is perfect. And I think, depending on, we'll tell if the amount of people come who we think are going to come, you'll probably have like 10-15 minutes per person. So there's enough time to kind of go through the process in a methodical way,
Okay.
with them. And the way the rotation works is sometimes people are a little bit longer, sometimes people are a little bit slower. So take the time that you think makes sense. And if we're running low on time, we'll convey that to you. But I think that's exactly right. Going through
Okay.
and explaining people what you're doing, I think is exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And then the second one is, you mentioned a couple of the websites are glitchy. I've had varying degrees of
Yeah.
connectivity success at DC public libraries. If we have a hotspot, is it helpful to bring it along with us, or like, is that something you would recommend?
So I will say to that, we bring a hotspot too, but if you have an
Okay.
extra, there's no harm in doing that. I will say last time we were there at that library, we didn't have any connection problems, but it's always best because of our reliance on the internet for these property checkups to actually go as they're supposed to. If
Hmm.
you have additional hotspot devices, that's great, and feel free to bring them with.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you
That's
for
a
both
great
those
idea.
answers.
And yes, I think just Samuel hit the nail on the head there. But I think one of the things we want to do is help people understand kind of what we're looking at and how we're gathering this information, because it offers just greater comfort with the process, right? We want to empower people so that if they decided after this event, I don't want to move forward and do an intake for representation with any of these folks, I'd rather go to, my cousin who's an attorney. Maybe they do that, but they at least have this property checkup sheet that they've kind of been walked through. I think it's really helpful in building that trust and building that connection with folks. And also ties in really nicely to that sheet that Samuel, if there are not any additional questions, I'd love to just show folks that really quickly. The sheet that does have the QRs and the bit.ly links on it. Samuel, if you want to scroll down to the bottom there, we are actually going to have each of you go ahead before any community members walk up to us to just fill out and give to us a volunteer confidentiality agreement. This is something that actually came to us as a suggestion from a community member and a volunteer that they had met with. The person said, how do I know you're not going to be doing anything with regard to my property that you've now learned about after this event? And we said, that's a great thing. We want to offer people visibility and assurances that we are not doing anything nefarious, that none of our volunteers are doing anything nefarious with their information. And so we have each of our volunteers complete this simple confidentiality agreement, and assurance that you are not going to do anything nefarious with this. But the other piece that is really helpful is that after you have served someone, you are going to say, I'm turning my laptop towards you. You can see my laptop. I'm going to X out of this browser so you can see I'm not storing any information about your property on my device. It's one of those simple steps that goes a long way in continuing to build that trust with the community. We did this at the last event, and I think it was very well received by folks. So that's something we'll remind you of day of, but certainly appreciate that. And you'll have a copy of this sheet in your folder and on the table as well. Okay, so Samuel, if you want to go real quick back to the PowerPoint, I think there might be one or two notes we wanted to share in these last 3 minutes together. But we are just so grateful. So again, here's the information. You should have all of it on your calendar invites. We are very close to the metro. There are bus routes right up Riggs Road and South Dakota Avenue, both of which are very close to the venue. And it's be comfortable. We want you to be approachable, feel approachable. We will have name tags. You'll write your own first name on your name tag at the event once you come. And certainly, if you have any questions in the meantime, I've shared our contact information into the chat here. Please reach out to Yari. Please reach out to Samuel or myself, or info@dcaffordablelaw.org with any direct questions. And with that, Samuel, next slide. Perfect. Da-da-da. All right, so that's it. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you next week. Please follow us on LinkedIn. You can check out our news on our website and learn more about the clients and the impact of our work across all of our areas of practice through the impact page of our website, and support our work. We don't want to be strangers to you. We hope that you'll remain connected with us. It really does take a village, and we are grateful for every single person, and certainly to JPMC for fueling our work and believing in our mission, and using this as an opportunity to make a real meaningful impact in the District of Columbia for the people who are our neighbors and who work and live alongside us every day. So with that, thank you, everyone. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. I am going to stop the recording now. And if any other questions arise, feel free to name them.